babysit the team.
What is going on, folks? We're back, and we are in the Super Bowl now, as we've waited and waited and waited all year, all playoffs to say that we are finally officially the NFC representative in the Super Bowl. And it was kind of obvious that this team was the best team in the conference. As much as people wanted to make excuses all year, the Eagles were the best team, and it showed. So we're here. We're punching our ticket to Arizona, and we're headed. What's going on, baby?
It's good, man. It's good. I mean, I got to say, what to me, that Steelers game was when I was like, I think that they're going to win the NFC Championship game. When I know the Steelers not good, but that just performance that they just put on where they just completely dominated and played those games where they played mistake-free football and things like that. And this is what we've been talking about. They had those games where they just execute like crazy. And yeah, they left some plays out there against the Niners. But I mean, both playoff games, the offensive and defensive line just completely controlled the game.
Yeah.
I mean, they just played to what, they could get 4 yards of carry. They're just going to take it all day. And that's just what they did in both games. I mean,
yeah,
you were there. So, I mean, what was it like? What did you see?
Oh, this is what I saw. So we went absolutely insane. Obviously, the crowd, that all soaking that in both playoff games was amazing. But yeah, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, on the football field, the Eagles absolutely dominated at the line of scrimmage, and that's going to win you a lot of games in the NFL. You can't beat a team if you can't stop their run game and if you can't protect your quarterback or get any sort of run game going. And nobody's been able to do that in the playoffs to us, and all year that's been our MO. And we've seen a couple Super Bowl runs, and that's what it is. That's what happens when you're that type of team. You have a great offensive line, you have a great defensive line. You pressure their team's quarterback, and you run the ball well and protect your own quarterback. And if you do those things at a very high level that the Eagles have, it's hard to think that you go into any game where you're like, man, something could happen where we just like get wrecked or something, or we just like you can't imagine like, hey, going into bad seasons and bad games, the first things we would always talk about is that hope this offensive line holds up or hope we can get pressure. And you never have to say that about this Eagles team. You trust those two units so much to take over games. That's exactly what they did.
Yeah. And, and now they have, all the playmakers, whatnot. Jalen Hurts is balling out this year, obviously. So, a lot of scrutiny is that, it's not the sexy way to win by, Giants running all over them for 250 yards. I think the Eagles had 150 yards rushing in this game. Jalen Hurts throws for 120. But I think what has been really impressive for the Eagles, kind of since that Redskins game, of course we signed the D tackles, but, kind of getting punched in the mouth a little bit. I think the Eagles have done a really good job of really, figuring out how the game's going to flow and kind of playing to that, where we can beat you in a lot of different ways. And, we can drop 30 on you by passing, but we could also drop 30 on you by controlling the clock and running down the field. And that's really what happened, is that they just they saw the opportunity. Brock Purdy getting knocked out almost immediately really dictated the flow of the game. The Niners, you got to give them credit. Their defense really kept them in the game that the first half. And, we go down, we get the penalties for the second touchdown. And then once Josh Johnson fumbled that ball and they pick it up, I say it's Josh Johnson, but once he fumbled that ball, that was kind of a wrap at that point. At that point I was like, yeah, these guys aren't going to be able to do anything.
Yeah. It's funny. Jason said, obviously, I went to the game with Jason. We're sitting there, we go up 14-7, and he's like, I just want Josh Johnson to do something stupid, and we get the ball back. And I'm like, dude, there's a minute 30 left. Like, I'd be cool with 14-7. Next thing you know, ball hits him square in the hands and he drops the snap and we jump on and we just look at each other. We're like, we're going to win this football game. Like we
Yeah.
just knew it. Like we went down, we score again. Right. And then, you're right. The defense really plugged away in the first half and it was a gritty game
Mm-hmm.
and the floodgates open. We beat the life out of that team. We manhandled them. We just got more physical as the game went on and they were like, dude, we can't do anything. Like we're like, our quarterbacks are both hurt.
Yeah.
Purdy had to play with them. They were running like double end around reverses and stuff because Purdy couldn't throw the ball because his elbow was messed up. And Josh Johnson got knocked out with a concussion. And like you said, you were texting me and saying in the group chat and stuff, like that was one of the best like individual efforts by a player in Hassan Reddick that we've seen in forever. And he's been a game wrecker, like the definition of the word. And he's the guy, he's what you needed on this defense to put them over the top. And that signing is going to go down as one of the best ever. And I think might not be such a sleeper now, but I think that a sleeper pick for the MVP of the Super Bowl could be Hassan Reddick. If he has a 2-sack, strip sack kind of game, man, he is a monster. Like he legitimately reminds me of when the Broncos made that run and had Von Miller. And he was just in the backfield nonstop. It feels like every lineman is affected by Hassan Reddick. Like feels like every offensive lineman on their side is like worried about him. And when he makes a play and gets around his side, it's like the whole line just like freaks out and everyone makes plays. And he's been an unbelievably impactful signing right at the right age. It just feels like another season where this is what a Super Bowl from the Eagles has looked like every year that we've seen it happen, is great signings in free agency, a well-built trenches, and then obviously you need a quarterback to be the general out there, and we have that too, so can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, it was an outstanding performance by him. I mean, that was unbelievable. Like I said, the best individual defensive performance I've ever seen. Brandon Graham will always be enshrined as the greatest defensive play in Philadelphia sports history. But I mean, who knows? There could be some in the Super Bowl for the Eagles here, but that crazy. But Eagles, pretty much all 22 starters healthy going into the Super Bowl. Not so much the case in 2017, of course, but I mean, you got to feel like great about this.
Yeah. I mean, what more can you ask for? I think the most injured guys are Hurts and Lane Johnson, which stinks, but I mean, everybody's playing well. Everybody's stepping up in the absence of these guys, or not the absence, but just the lesser. I mean, Lane has played great. I think Jalen might. I really want to know the extent of this injury. We were talking about it today on Twitter in my group chat. This might come out after the season like this is a little worse than we said, but he played through it and he wanted to, and he was able to. I mean, it's not Brock Purdy out there that can't throw the ball at all. It's probably just really sore all up in there, and I can't imagine it feels really good. And I think it has impacted him a little bit. I think he's been a little bit low on a few throws. I think he's been a little inaccurate downfield on a few throws, and whether that's the shoulder or not, I mean, I even if it is, bad, I can't say for sure, but he was hitting these throws all year, and that's the one thing that I've kind of noticed. But at the same time, he has made some throws too, and he gets the ball there, and his receivers, they catch the ball, and he can still make plays with his legs, and it just shows how great he really is playing through injury. I mean, could we have asked for a more perfect quarterback, like a more perfect leader of this team in Philadelphia, in this city than this guy? It's insane. I mean, they win this game, and he's probably the best quarterback ever already. And I'm wearing the 03 Donovan McNabb Pro Bowl right now.
Yeah.
Get in front of the camera here, show it off. I'm wearing that from 03, got it on eBay. A little crusty, a little musty, but I'm putting it on because Donovan, we've been looking for that kind of leader for a long time since him, and this guy's even better.
And it's funny because it's like his presence out there, even when he's not 100%. And the most easiest thing to relate it to is probably Joel Embiid, with the Sixers. When he's out there, even if he's not dropping 30, his presence and impact still out there. With Jalen Hurts, you saw how different the offense was with Gardner Minshew. His threat, to run the ball at any time, the RPOs, it changes the run game. And, a lot of people are kind of like, I think a lot of people discount that because the rushing yards aren't his recorded stats, but he is having an impact. Again, last week we were talking about 11 on 11 football with Jalen Hurts. That's what you have to play. You don't get that extra man. You got to be, mindful of them. And that really impacts the rushing game. I mean, the offensive line is washing people out. Don't get me wrong, but this rushing attack is effective, and he's a big part of it, even when he's not running the football.
Yeah, and he took off a few times last game and got hit a couple times, and it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look like it feels good.
No,
out there and every time, and people are really they take it for granted how good this guy is. And I'm telling you, we've watched football for quite a long time now.
Yeah,
it's hard, it's crazy to say, but about
yeah.
20 years or so now that I've really been intently watching football.
Yeah,
and I can tell you what, man, it's you don't take this kind of season or this kind of player, or these kind of performances for granted when you've been seeing enough football.
Yeah, it's just been a dominating effort so far in the playoffs, and that's great. And we'll get to the Chiefs next week. We kind of got this low, but what we really wanted to do is kind of go back and compare this run to the other three runs. 17, 04, it just completely different times. But this one feels like the 04 felt like, yes, like they're due.
Let's start with 04. Let's talk a little bit about 04. Where were we in our lives? I was in ninth grade, as were you. We were in ninth grade. I was 15 years old. You probably didn't hit 15 until a little after the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah. But you almost have to take it back further to 2000, this McNabb's second year, because this was a huge runway up to that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot deeper than just 04.
Yeah.
In sixth grade is really when I started paying more attention to, all sports. I was a big hockey fan in elementary school. And I'm going to go all the way back to that. So sixth grade, really started watching more basketball and football, and started to understand sports as a whole a little bit more, and started playing the video games so I knew the players and stuff. And in seventh grade, I got Madden 2003. I rented it, and I just couldn't wait to play it after school, after hockey practice. I was on the ice hockey team in middle school, and I just started falling in love with football, and I loved knowing the players and all that. So seventh grade was really when I started watching football every week. And my parents are split up, so I would go to my dad's on Sundays, because on Saturdays, that's the day you want to go outside and run around with your friends and stuff. Sundays seemed like a good day to spend at my dad's house. So I'd go over there and I'd watch all the games with them. And eighth grade was when I was on it, every single week. I in seventh, I was I was watching it, but I don't really remember as much. In eighth, I remember being there every single week and going to my dad's going to the game, that NFC Championship with my dad, that in 03-04 against Carolina was my first game. So the build-up, like you were talking about, was the Rams lost to them. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost to them. The Carolina Panthers, my first game, lost to them.
Yeah.
We pick up, and in Carolina, it was blatantly obvious that we needed wide receivers, right?
Yeah.
The big news coming out of gym class in eighth grade that one day, walking on out of gym class, and we get Terrell Owens. Yep. Oh, my goodness. I couldn't wait to go home and watch SportsCenter all day and order buffalo chicken cheesesteak with the money my mom left me. I was so sportsed out, so Philly eagled out. I was so in love with it at that point. And that next season is when I went to my first several games, and I went to that playoff game against the Vikings. Yeah. We went to the Super Bowl and we lost. And I was so proud of the team, though. After those years of missing out and then investing so much into that season, right, in 04, seeing games live, watching every game. I mean, that year I was oh my gosh, I remember every game. And and I thought they're going to go back. I mean, what? You don't think we're going to be back next year? We're going to actually win it next year. And that's when I first realized football is a little more difficult than that. So, as a child, that's why I wore the Donovan, this hat, the NFC Championship in 2004. That was my team that I grew up on. I know the same thing with you. Pretty much just told our story both.
Yeah.
That was kind of what we grew up on. We grew up on it. So as a kid, how I felt about that championship was I just felt like we would be good forever. And I just felt like it was oh, it's all right. We'll win next year. And I was I didn't cry. A lot of kids cried after the loss. I didn't cry, nothing. I was well, what can we do to get better? Like, what it's kind of shaped who I am today, really,
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what my mindset was like, man, we played a tough game, we lost, but we're gonna be back. Like, we still have McNabb, To, like this team's so cool. He got hurt and he came back and played in the Super Bowl. And if he was 100%, like he's gonna be next year, like, oh, I just thought
Yeah.
we would be back. And so I didn't really like cherish all those because I wasn't scarred yet. We weren't. It was our first experiences with football. We just thought it was great. Like, oh, we're gonna be fine. So
Yeah.
then, obviously the one in 2017 was a little bit different. We got there again. It was like, holy, we
Yeah.
really did
Back.
this. I mean,
Yeah.
you
No,
talk about your 04 if it was any different than mine.
yeah. No, I mean, I think I got in a little bit earlier. My parents are divorced as well. And I just remember, but my dad would, always watch the Eagles with his friends when I was a kid growing up. The first football game I remember was the Steelers and actually the Cowboys Super Bowl in '95. That was the
Mhm.
first like football game I actually remember watching. Of course, we wanted the Steelers to win. But I just remember them sucking and then getting McNabb and, my dad being really excited about that, just like a change, getting Reed. And
Right.
then I remember really the first like moment of play. I know in 2000 they lost to the Giants. And in 2001, when they beat Tampa in the wild card, then they won the next game in Chicago and they lost to the Rams.
Yeah.
I was like, whatever. Like, I was still a little too like young and definitely too young. But then like the next year when they lost to Tampa, that was the first time that like I really experienced like severe heartbreak as like a
Yeah.
sports fan. It was a little bit against like, the Sixers with AI, but that was like the first time. And then the next year you're like, oh, okay, we're good again. And again, like it's like you just think you're going to be good again, but you're going to keep getting back to these NFC Championship games and have another crack. But then, they lose to Carolina and you're just like, oh,
Yeah. That was
and,
that
and,
was,
and
that was
that
wild.
Falcons.
Leaving
Yeah.
that stadium, I remember as a kid leaving that stadium, hearing people around me saying, like, this is the worst. This is worse than last year. This is the
Yeah.
worst loss ever, like literally
Yeah.
ever. 14-3 against that team with Jake Delhomme, couldn't move the ball at all.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
That was tough. And then, I was at that Viking games too in 04. So that was awesome. And then, they go, the championship game, they lose in the Super Bowl. But, that whole buildup, I think when like, if that kind of happened to us now, with no wide receivers, like how that, like such an obvious, like glaring need. I don't know if I'd be well. Now, if it's like the Chiefs, now they've lost a lot of championship games leading up to the Super Bowl, but they have receivers. Those have been like hard fought games.
Yeah.
The Eagles' problem, and when you're 12 and you can see that, like, hey, we need some receivers, and you're not getting it. I just couldn't imagine going through that as an adult.
Yeah.
And we said it in 2019. We were like, well, in 2020, there's no way the receivers could possibly be worse. And then that year we have Jalen Reagor and JJ, which is still to this day the worst receiving core I've ever seen of all time. But let's not make this about those guys. But like, it was so obvious when you're 12 and 13. It's like, please just come on, any receiver.
We've always said though that the Pinkston Thrash, like what Torrance Small was it? That group was like better, and Freddie Mitchell. That group was better than the JJ, the 2019, the 2020 with Jordan, even with Jordan Matthews and DGB. Like even those guys, like the receivers were bad. But I go back and I watch those games and I'm like, man, I see like James Thrash making like handsy catches that like Aguilar struggled with at times, and he's like a first round pick. Like I'm like, man, like these guys that we thought stunk, these receivers in 2019, even like when Alshon got hurt, it was bad, and like that slapstick group of bums, but. Yeah, that receiving core was bad, but it's crazy that we've lived long enough now to see a worse one. But yeah, that obviously at age 12, 13 years old, and seeing those receivers and then like, everyone obviously the criticism, we're used to the criticism of the quarterback because it was McNabb. Everyone had the pitchfork out for McNabb and want to run him out of town. And I'm like, dude, this guy is like good. He runs around, he makes plays. He's throwing to Pinkston, and the best player on the offense was Chad Lewis. Yeah. Honestly, Chad Lewis, the slow, big, like bulky tight end that could barely like move. And McNabb's making this dude look like Antonio Gates.
Yeah.
And it was just a different era, man. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
different era. And you know what? It was crazy because in 03, we had the three-headed monster.
Yeah.
The Buckhalter, Deuce Staley, and Westbrook, and that, like, we ran the ball to be a good team. It's kind of like this year, but that's what it was. And at the end of the day, it killed us not having receivers all those years. Stuff.
Yeah. And then, but just having that huge, like, lead up to that moment to get to the Super Bowl, obviously disappointed how it ended. But 16, 17, I mean, 17, it was just, you draft Wentz, he goes through his lumps the rookie year, plays pretty well in his rookie year, honestly, in my opinion, with no talent. Again, no receivers.
You could start it in 2016, or you could talk about Chip Kelly. I mean, we a lot of the players that contributed and contribute to this team today were Chip Kelly players.
Yeah.
Obviously in 2017, let's just start there. You had Malcolm Jenkins, who was I mean, that guy was a monster. He was a stud, great leader, perfect safety for us, best since Dawkins, right? And then, he was acquired by Chip Kelly, and a lot of the things, we kept the sports science. So, me and, for anyone out there watching that don't know our background, me and Steve started our show based around the Chip Kelly era. We used to be on YouTube. All our videos are still up if you want to go watch them. Channel's now called Views from the Link. You can check it out. It's all from the Chip Kelly era, pretty much, up until the Doug Peterson Super Bowl, really. So we've already covered all that stuff. So honestly, you can go back and get way more on that. But we loved Chip Kelly. We were big Chip Kelly guys. I was a huge Chip Kelly fan. I thought he was going to revolutionize the game. I liked the idea of the offense. And not only that, but they were winning games. I mean, they went to the playoffs his first year, won the division. And then the next year, I thought they kind of got flubbed out of the playoffs, winning 10 games, and they didn't make it because the two wild card teams were better. But and the 7-win Panthers made it, which stunk, but can't complain. It's how it is. But I was like, no, we're good. We're going to come back. We'll be all right, obviously. But that 7-9, the final year of Chip Kelly was brutal. The 2015 season, we had fun. We went to a lot of games that year, but that was kind of our first year.
Had free agents, horrible offensive line play that year.
So
bad. They couldn't block anything.
Yeah, that was terrible. It was just the worst. Yeah. Such a poorly built team, built so much from the outside in. They got a running back to Marco Murray. They got all that. They had Bradford back there, more of a pocket guy, and then they just couldn't figure out how to build the O-line, and it was bad. It was bad, and they got rid of a couple weapons they probably shouldn't have. Weird. It was a weird time, but having no answers for D-Jax and Macklin leaving, like you get Aguilar and Jordan Matthews, and they just didn't really fit the bill. So it was a bad time. We had some boring seasons, some really humdrum kind of seasons where we're like, man, fired the guy. We signed Doug Peterson, some bumbling buffoon. Like he just sounded like, and you're like, this goofy bum quarterback that we had back in like the early 2000s. I swear the first time, one of the early football games I ever saw was the Browns were on TV. And I'm watching this game. I'm like, what kind of formation lines up a wide receiver as the quarterback? It was Dennis Northcutt, a wide receiver they had.
Yeah.
I asked my dad, I'm like, what is that? This was before Wildcat or any of that stuff. And I didn't watch college, so I didn't understand the concept of that. He's like, yeah, their starting quarterback so bad, they're just running a play without him to try to make something happen. And I'm like, damn. And it was Doug Peterson. He was their starting quarterback. And he was brutal. And if you look his numbers up, even in a bad passing era, he was brutal. But he backed up Dan Marino. He backed up Brett Favre. He was coached by Andy Reid. He coached with Andy Reid. So you're like, maybe this goofy dude is just going to be the opposite of Chip Kelly. He's going to be very warm and friendly. And maybe we can do something with him. I don't know. And he hires Frank Reich and John DeFilippo, and they had this great staff, all quarterback guys. They get Carson Wentz, like you were saying. And then, you saw a lot of potential in Carson, right, as his first year. So Harry Roseman's like, all right, he looks like the guy. Let's load up. And they do that. And obviously you all know what happens. He gets hurt. But there was a lot of anxiety building up on that run, especially because Nick Foles was in there. You're like, oh my gosh, what's he going to do? And we just wanted our first one so bad. With this Super Bowl that we're in now, I'm just like hyped for the game. I'm just like, We got one. We're back. Like, what makes me think again? I mean, I'm back to my child. I feel like a child again, thinking like, well, we'll be back. I mean, whatever. We
Yeah.
Mahomes, we'll get him next year. Like, I don't want to lose by any means. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely don't want to lose at all. But I don't have the same anxiety. I mean, I'm going to be nervous around game time, obviously, but I'm so confident. Like, I'm confident. I just want to see this team ball out one last time and get this done because
Yeah.
I really just don't think they're better than us. I don't. And
No, I agree.
I'll break the game down next week, but I'm not as anxious. I mean, maybe it's because it's not. I'll update everyone next week, but I haven't been as the nerves haven't been as high, and maybe before the game, I will, and maybe during the game, obviously, especially if it's close, and I think it might be a close game.
Yeah.
I think it will be a close game. I haven't said a blowout all playoffs, and we blow everyone out, so maybe we'll blow them out if I say it's going to be close, but. Really, we're just more talented, and honestly, if they lose this game, I'll be able to say wholeheartedly that it was a mental thing because they're not better than us. They're not, and if they can't beat the Chiefs, it's probably because I'm forecasting why the reason they're going to lose, probably because they just lost their poise against Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid, who have Super Bowl experience, who are Hall of Famers. Pat Mahomes is probably the quickest quarterback I've ever seen make a Hall of Fame case ever. Like, I feel like he could retire now, and what are you going to say? Like, he's not going to, obviously, and that would make things different. But in his first 5 years starting, he's been to 5 straight AFC Championship games, 3 Super Bowls. Like, that is LeBron James level stuff. Like, that is
for sure.
unreal. And it's like the NFL is a league of parity more than anything. And we just saw Brady do this, and he won a bunch and all. I'm like, you're never going to see that again. And they're doing it right now. I mean, this guy is a freak. It's unreal. They lose Tyreek Hill. They have different receivers, and they're just the same team. They just go out there, they score 30, and they win games. And that's just what they do. So the Eagles are their perfect match. They have a great defensive line, all that. We'll talk about that next. But I don't have the nerves that I had. I just think if we play our game and mentally are in there and we execute, I think we just win because we're just a better team. And if we play our best, I don't think they can beat us, even if they play their best. So
I agree.
My opinion, and that's how I feel. In 2004, I was a little kid. I was like, T.O.'s coming back. This is gonna be cool. Like, we can beat him. I hope. And in 2017, I'm like, holy shit. Nick Foles. Like, what is gonna happen? I have no idea. I really want a ring. Like, come on. Like, let's get this done. Boom, we win. This year, I'm like, come on. Like, let's go. I'm ready. Like, I feel so confident. Like, I'm just confident. I'm ready for the game. I'm just like, I just want to see it happen because I feel it. I just want to see it.
And I'd be remiss not to touch upon 04 one more time. It's like, you sign T.O., but, he gets hurt right before the playoffs. So you got to get to the Super Bowl without him. And you're just like, oh my God, the reason we get this guy is to get us over the hump. And he's not there. And, the championship game, they dominate and he comes back in the Super Bowl and he plays well, not healthy, but I just remember stressing out over that at the time. And
I was freaking out, dude. I was freaking out. I literally told my mom. My mom was like, "T.O.'s out for the season," and I was like, "They're just saying that because it's T.O." Like, I was in denial. It was the first time I ever faced like that. I was like, "They're just," saying, and I'm like, "Mom, the season's only like a couple weeks long anyway. Like, it's not for the playoffs." And it was in question if he was going to be able to return.
Yeah.
And it was the season meant the whole thing. And I remember we had to go to the mall that night for some reason. The day the news came out. And I remember there was no smartphones. I couldn't do anything. I was just like walking around the mall, just shitting myself.
Yeah.
And I walk by and I'm talking about it or something or whatever I see a guy working at a store and he's like, the trainer said he'd have him running in 4 weeks. And that was my punchline the rest of the time leading up to the trainer said that he had him running in 4 weeks. I heard this from a Foot Locker worker. That was my source back then. I had I didn't know how to. We had internet. I was on the websites, but it wasn't like it is with the reporters. Yeah. You had to wait for SportsCenter to come on the next day to see the updates. Like, please tell me something good about. So you saw all the clips of him running in the pool and getting ready, and I'm like, all right, he'll be back. But you're right. And then in 2017, Carson Wentz gets injured, and you're like, dude, we had a quarterback playing MVP football, and he got hurt. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then this year, it almost happened again. Jalen Hurts gets injured against Chicago, and you're like, no, I swear when they texted me, when my friend texted me and said, Jalen Hurts broke his collarbone. And that's the only thing I saw. And I was like, what? No way. Like I was like, that's it. That's the season. We're done. We're done. But I was
Yeah.
like, wait, how did he break his collarbone if he's like throwing passes? Like I was like, every time I've seen a guy break his collarbone, he just
Yeah.
can't move his arm like anywhere. Like I saw Romo do it twice, and he was like this, or like he had his arm just like that. He couldn't move. He was on his back like that. So, and I remember my buddy who played ice hockey in college, he broke his collarbone and was like, I texted him, I was like, there's no way Hurts played with a broken collarbone. He's like, dude, if he broke his collarbone, he wouldn't have been able to play. Like you would have known it right away. So I was like,
Yeah.
it can't be a broken collarbone. But the MVP odds started dropping. And I was like, something's going on. And like 10 minutes later, the news comes out. Shoulder injury. So I'm like a nervous wreck the next couple weeks. But once he started practicing again and they were like, he's coming back. It's just like I want to see this happen because despite the fact that he missed 2 games, we're not like doing it on some weird circumstance. I mean, yeah, he's a little banged up, but so is their quarterback. So whatever. Like, it's like even playing field. Like, it's not like one team suffered a crazy injury and the other team didn't. Like, it's 2 teams meeting, and if something happens in the game, then that's one thing. But going into this game, everyone's like gonna play. It's something worth getting hyped for. It's a matchup worth getting hyped for. And you know what? It's Black History Month, and it's the first time 2 black quarterbacks have ever played in the Super Bowl against each other. And I have more hype for this Super Bowl, and maybe just because it's the newest one, and I'm always going to say that about whatever one we're in at the time, but more hype and more just excitement for this Super Bowl, more natural excitement and not nerves and not such crazy anxiety right now than I did for the other 2. And maybe not the 04 one because I was so young, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, 2017-18, I was not looking forward to the game at all. We just because we just had to win. Like I didn't know how I would recover because you go from 04 to 17. It's like, well, what if we don't come back again? And you sign all these free agents, you go in, and they get it done, and it's the craziest game ever. It's back and forth. I think I had to drink about 15 Bud Lights and like 5 shots of Fireball all during the game.
We watched together, by the way, everybody.
Yeah.
Together, so.
Yeah, I fell asleep about 45 minutes after the game when the euphoria, but I had no idea how to cope with the game. But that felt like you just needed it. And this is like, I'm really looking forward to this game. And I agree with what you're saying. I think the Eagles, they are the better team. Not for nothing. Chiefs are pretty banged up. So, we're a little dinged up, but all our starters are going to play ready to go. And I'm sure most of the Chiefs guys are going to tough it out, but there's injuries are a little more severe than what we have going on our side. So,
it's definitely going to be one of those games where either Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid like further their ridiculous legacy together.
Yeah.
To another level, because I mean they're just not as good, and if they win, it's gonna be because of them, and that's what we have to really worry about. You can't get out coached and outplayed by Mahomes and Reid. I mean, it's gonna come down to that. And if you think about it, the 04 Super Bowl we went Belichick, Brady, and then the 2017 Belichick and Brady. So our Super Bowls have been against the GOATs of the sport.
Yeah,
and now we play. Now we play a guy that I call the baby goat in Pat Mahomes, and Andy Reid is. I mean, can you say anything less about the guy? All he does is go to the playoffs. All he does is have winning seasons. All he does is go deep in the playoffs and go to Super Bowls and win conference championships and go to conference championships. He has been there, done that. Like he's not going to get scared. That's for sure. They're not going to be afraid. They might lose, but they're not going to be afraid. They're not going to back down. If we don't back down, if we don't get afraid, and I don't think we will, and that's why I think we're going to win the game.
Yeah,
that's the only way. Is if we beat ourselves, if we get in our own heads and we're fumbling, or someone makes a stupid play, or they're just not looking good, and they're not playing good, and they're not sharp. But I mean, I feel like when you get in this situation in Philadelphia, I mean, you saw it in 2017, 2018. Why did we win that game? Because we just wanted it more. We wanted it. The Patriots had a bunch of Super Bowls already. And I think Mahomes and them want it bad because it's not the same as the Patriots, right? Yeah. But when you are in Philly, right, like I was saying, if you're in Philly, you're on this type of team, you can see it in all the guys. They want it so bad. I mean, they just mauled through 2 teams in the playoffs. And it just was like a team that just was like, get out of our way. And we need this. So, like, putting it all on the line. This could be Jason Kelsey's last game. This could be Lane Johnson's. I don't want to say it, but he's going to retire, I think, a little more earlier than we expect. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to say this is going to be it for him, but I've heard things about how he doesn't like the fact that he's always rehabbing every offseason. He already knows he has to rehab this offseason because of this groin. And he's going to turn 33. That's a really good career for an offensive tackle with his kind of like athleticism and the style he plays in. 33, 34 years old is probably all he's really got. And
Yeah.
he had the anxiety thing last year where he took a few weeks off, and to think that he might have been contemplating retirement isn't too far fetched. And so I think that we're going to give this kind of effort. We're going to give that kind of effort, and that's because we have guys that could be out of here. BG, Fletch, we'll get into all that later, but
Yeah.
I think they could, but there's just as much chance that they come back and try to run it back, right? They try to run it back, get another one quick, and see if they can repeat. Because you don't want to. It's hard to walk away on top. It's harder than you think. Harder than just walk away on top when you feel like you could get the repeat and be really on top. It's like a gamble.
Well, I think a lot of the veterans on this team know it. They've been through some very lean years of Eagles football and have also tasted the championship and what's that like. So, they're certainly going to go in there and give it its all. And I think what's funny about this is, there's so many wrinkles of Andy Reid's, fingerprints in the organization still, where we build the lines, we win in the trenches. And if the Eagles are going to win, that's how they're going to win the game. Is they're going to dominate the Chiefs O-line. Our O-line has been mauling people all playoffs. So if that's probably how we're going to win the game if we do. And if we can control the line of scrimmage and not turn the ball over, the Eagles, like we've been saying on the show, what we say in the group chat, if we don't make mistakes, we are very, very hard to beat.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's what it is. And we just played the most physical defense in the league and just really just tossed them aside. And you saw
kind of bullying them.
Yeah, you saw the holes the line was making. You saw the push they were getting. You saw the physicality they were playing with. And it was like, man, they're serious. Like, they are on a tear right now. And it's funny because they kind of sputtered without Jalen Hurts toward the end of the season. Everyone's like, one and done. The minute they get into the playoffs, they start mauling teams. And they're just like the hottest team. It reminds me of that Seahawks team in 2013 that just cooked the Broncos, despite Peyton Manning, despite all – smoked them. And I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how bad that it's going to be. If it is bad, I don't know if it's going to be a game like that, but they do give me that vibe. The defense is just on fire. The offensive line is on fire. Yeah. And you're right. The organization has a lot of wrinkles at Andy Reid in it, and he kind of knows what's coming, and we kind of know what's coming from them too. So lock up the receivers. Travis Kelce might get his, but get off the field on third downs and dominate. And that's the way you do that, is dominating the trenches. You got to stop them on early downs on the ground and just plays in general, get pressure on them. And on the other side, run the ball well on early downs, get Jalen in some easy situations, let him impact the game, let him be himself. And if you just do those things and stay focused, you're going to win. You're going to win it all. So you saw the clip of Devontae and Jalen Hurts. I'm not sure if you saw it on the sideline.
Yeah.
He said, "What did I tell you? What we were going to do when we were talking last year?" And it's like, man, this dude just manifested it. And he put the work in. He didn't just manifest it. He put the work in. I don't want to promote too much manifestation because I know everybody thinks if you think something, it happens. He put the work in, and he knew it was going to happen because of that. That was his manifestation, and getting in the gym, getting on the field, working for greatness. And that's what this team did. And they got one more. They're not just happy to be here. Let's just win the whole thing right now. Get it out of the way, get it under our belt, and then we can see how many we can get with this regime. Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts.
And I think Devontae and A.J. Brown, they played well in the playoffs, but not those huge flashy games. And I think they are chomping at the bit to get out there and light them up.
Yeah, I'd love to see A.J. and Devontae have some big plays. I think this defense can be had a little bit more than the defense that we saw last week. I thought they did a really good job. Despite the score, it was a really good job of taking away a lot of what we did. I mean, Jalen settled for a lot of underneath, a lot of quick routes, a lot of quick throws. And I don't think it was because he's not willing to throw deep. And again, like I said, I do think his shoulder's a little bit hurt, but it's not him an unwillingness to throw deep. I just think that's what was there. And I think there's going to be a lot more big plays to be had against the Chiefs. I don't think they're as tough. I think he'll have more time in the pocket more consistently, and I think they'll be able to run the ball as well the same way. So I think they can see a couple big plays from one of the receivers, both of them maybe.
Yeah, and we're going to need points. We're going to put the pedal on the metal. I know we don't want to project too much for next week. We're going to say that for next week's show. But, the 49ers game, it was like a regular season Eagles game where there's so much criticism in the first half of the year where it's like, what are they doing? We just take the air of the ball in the second half because, like, we know they couldn't throw the ball. And that's why the win wasn't sacks. I mean, of course, the Brock Purdy getting hurt, but like
kind of bad weather. If you want to be honest, there was wind, it was windy, it was cold, and it was rainy. It was a game that, like you said, you want to just like deflate the game at the end of the game. You got 2 scores, and what are you going to do?
And the Niners are running clock too because they don't have a quarterback.
Right, and then they have to go on these long drives, and they don't have they can't afford to go on long drives, and then you're running the ball so well, and you don't want the only way that the Eagles, I mean the 49ers had a shot to come back in that game is if the Eagles turn the ball over in the second. Exactly. And that's it. Like if you don't turn the ball over, you keep the ball, you convert third down, you convert first downs, and you win the game. And that's the whole thing. You don't need to put the ball in harm's way if it's not necessary. Dak Prescott threw the ball over 50 times, I think, against the Niners. I just looked at it today. I think it was like 40-something times, 50-something times. Like it's ridiculous. What are you doing? The guy blew the game because of that.
Yeah,
you got to run the ball. You got to be able to control the game against, especially a team that has an offense that needs short fields to capitalize, especially in the playoffs. Like, come on, Brock Purdy's not like going down and cooking teams many times, against good teams. So the Cowboys shut them down. The Eagles did too. Difference was the Eagles knew how to get down the field and score points, and the Cowboys just kept throwing the ball and turning it over. So that was the difference. And really, like you said, just keep the offense off the field, convert third downs, and we'll talk a lot more about this next week. But we kind of know the keys and the recipe to victory. It just got to happen. So I thought this was one of my favorite episodes. Whoever's watching still, appreciate you. Whoever watched, appreciate you. Really love talking old ball. We want to hear about your stories about being fans and all that. And I get a lot of, that on Twitter. So keep hitting me up, keep DMing me, whatever, mentioning me, talking crap, whatever, anybody. Always love talking football. And we got one more win, baby. We got one more week until our Super Bowl show. And then we got the show on Sunday. So, Is that it? Is that all we got?
Fly, Eagles, fly, baby.
You got nothing else?
That's all. Fly, Eagles, fly. We're winning this thing.
Eagles, fly. All right. See you next week, guys.